All right, everybody, welcome back. It's the end of the world with Michael and Stu.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Stu, and today we're discussing supply chains. That's right. It's our first...
The masterpiece of supply chain.
The work of art, that is, the work of, some would say, genius, that is the global supply chain, which is back in the news because of potential of these devastating tariffs taking hold, and will give us a chance to talk about one of our two favorite topics along with 9/11. That's right, COVID-19. And we'll talk about some articles. We watched a little docu-series about supply chains. Very interesting stuff. Meanwhile, before we get into all that, we should just talk about I feel like we had a week or two of a reprieve from most insanity. Maybe this is just...
Well, I think that's probably right. I feel as though even for him, when the market went nuts, right? And in the fallout to this initial run with the tariffs and stuff.
And the Musk judge election went badly. And
yeah, I feel like they kind of took a step back. It definitely, Musk's presence was less than. But then he did the full hour interview on Meet the Press that included the we'll talk about the doll quote soon.
Yeah.
But he sort of came back into form about a few things. Today, the big paired coupling of decisions was a tariff on movies not made in America.
Right, which is like, okay, so there just won't be any more American movies.
Sure.
I mean, like...
And then the second one, which weirdly seems to, at least in his brain, tie in to that.
Yeah.
I guess because of the way he thinks of the prison Alcatraz.
Right, which is through the Clint Eastwood movie, presumably.
Yeah, I would assume.
And like The Rock, the movie.
That he issued this sort of incredible Truth Social post, which I'm sure you read, about the glorious reopening of Alcatraz and getting serial offenders off the streets, etc. But we're not going to go through that one because we actually did just recently see a reporter ask him a question about it. And we don't do this a lot on the podcast.
A follow-up, yeah.
It was a follow-up after he'd supposedly, I guess, had time to think about it or not. But it's just the wording of it is, I think, kind of indicative of this confusion that we're all experiencing of whether we are under the thumb of an authoritarian dictator or he's really just shooting from the hip. Not to say we shouldn't be frightened either way, but let's just go through. So she says, Mr. President, how did you decide to reopen Alcatraz? Can you walk us through that decision? And his response was, did I say what? Which, okay. So she reiterates, to reopen Alcatraz, how will you use it? How did you come up with the idea? Which I like is just, I feel is something that is not really asked about.
He's like sitting in his office. He's like throwing darts. He's like, what is next?
Like that South Park bit about how the writers of Family Guy wrote episodes, where they're just like this totally loose association of things.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so he gets into it. It says, how did you come up with the idea? How will you use Alcatraz? And his response was verbatim. Well, I guess I was supposed to be a movie maker. We started with the movie making and will end. I mean, it represents something very strong, very powerful in terms of law and order. Our country needs law and order. Alcatraz is, I would say, the ultimate, right? Alcatraz, Sing Sing and Alcatraz, the movies. But there's more. So he says, I would say the ultimate, right? Alcatraz, Sing Sing, and Alcatraz, the movies. But it's right now a museum, believe it or not. A lot of people go there. It housed the most violent criminals in the world, and nobody ever escaped. Well, one person almost got there, but they, as you know the story, they found his clothing rather badly ripped up. And it was a lot of shark bites, a lot of problems. I like that. I like the idea that he like has been bitten by a shark, but there's all these other problems surrounding him.
Well, also his body's not there, but the clothes are just covered in shark bites and
That's right. All these shark bites,
still recognizable as clothes.
And this guy's just like, man, these shark bites, and that's the least of it, you know. Nobody's ever escaped from Alcatraz, and it just represented something. You look at it; it is sort of an image, which is a line I just love. You look at it; it is sort of an image. You saw that picture that was put out. It's sort of amazing, but it sort of represents something that's both horrible and beautiful and strong and miserable, weak. It's got a lot of qualities that are interesting.
Wait, strong, miserable, and weak?
Beautiful, strong, miserable, and weak.
What?
Yeah. And then that was it. He said, and I think they make a point.
Oh my god. Well, first of all, just to be my pedantic self, it was not one guy that escaped. It was three people, okay? It was on June 11th, 1962, right? I'm reading a comic book by the great writer Christopher Cantwell about this right now. And it was Frank Norris, John William Anglin, and Clarence Anglin. And it's not that we don't know for sure they escaped, but their bodies were never found. There was no shark-bitten prison jumpsuit that was discovered on the shore. Like,
I don't know. You've heard the stories too.
I just love the appeal to this like a supposed common memory that is just based on nothing.
Well, he does. That's like one of his favorite.
That's
things,
his trademark, right?
Yeah, it's just hearkening back to something that never happened, that nobody ever said. It's always like a lot of people are saying. Right?
Yeah.
But I love the idea that for him, it's like the most important thing is the image of Alcatraz.
Yeah,
will solve the issue of law and order in this country.
Well, this is very postmodern, right? Like,
what do you mean?
It's like Marshall McLuhan, or like it's like media theory. You know,
right.
It's like the message is more powerful than whatever it contains. Like the medium is the message, right? Like,
I love the
image of Alcatraz. It's like, oh no, I'm sneaking in, I'm gonna do a crime, and then Alcatraz. You know,
the mere threat of a 21st century American maximum security.
Well, the other thing about Alcatraz is like Alcatraz was shut down in the '60s because it was wildly impractical and inefficient and expensive. Right? Mm-hmm. And by 1963, when it was closed, it was completely falling down. Like, it's falling apart. And to like I was looking at some articles about this. I don't have them to cite, but it's going to be like billions of dollars to rebuild Alcatraz. And there's really there's no need.
I don't know if there's no need. I mean, it is sort of an image. But then, you know, to follow up with this, in addition to this recent spat about foreign filmmaking and the prison of Alcatraz.
Apparently, by the way, the foreign film thing is suggested to him directly by John Voight. So,
who I guess just can't find work, right?
Right. But I mean, and apparently because he doesn't want to like fly to Canada to be in a like direct to Hallmark Channel movie or whatever.
I actually kind of respect that. I mean, the idea that like this is all happening.
He's so
Voight
he's so
have to fly to do like
Hungarian action movie or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but then he did this interview with Meet the Press, where again, bless their heart, just like completely feckless reporter who's just I don't know if you watched it.
I did not.
I dragged myself through like the opening. I lasted maybe 40 minutes, pretty long.
Wow.
But just like the absolute lack of pushback, right? And even when ceding territory, then letting him be like, "This is a really bad interview. You're so negative," and she just is kind of like sitting there stunned. And this is the part that confuses me. One of the things that confused me, like a decade into the Trump era,
yeah,
of like. You're telling me that you're going to be doing this interview and you've seen this like thousands of times before, and you're just completely unable to make it sound like anything other than every other interview that happens. Like, so a few of the things that came out of this, one of the newsworthy things was this bit about dolls, right?
Yes.
Where in sort of vintage Trump form, he ends up giving this sort of insane, like anti-consumerist diatribe about how children don't need 30 dolls.
Yeah, he is a Marxist now.
Yeah, like at first blush,
Surprising to
yeah.
many.
I mean, we have been saying this for a while. But then this magical idea that they should be fine with two, which would sort of imply that there's this, I guess, economic class of people who before these tariffs were in the market for 30 dolls,
Right.
and then all of this shakes down, they'll still be in the market for dolls.
Let me read the quote. Somebody said, "Oh, the shelves are going to be open." I think he probably said the shelves are going to be bare, but
Yeah, yeah.
Mr. Trump said, "Well, maybe the children will have $2 instead of $30, and maybe the $2 will cost a couple bucks more than they would usually." It's like,
Yeah.
or
Well, it's
would normally.
again, it's like one of these hilarious, gross, either deliberate or otherwise misunderstandings or misrepresentations of the way that trade works, right?
Yeah.
So when trade is going to collapse and supply chains are going to come under threat and prices are going to go through the roof, he happily emphasizes the utter meaninglessness of so much of the stuff that we purchase, including from places like China, which is true. I mean, like,
Guilty.
we
Yeah.
yeah, we're all buying crap and junk that we don't need, and we're all taking advantage of this like exploitative situation writ large every single day. But it also just totally like ignores the fact that very serious consequences far beyond the idea of not being able to get dolls is about to be upon us.
No. No. Really?
No, it's just yeah. It's the idea that everything that won't be able to be sort of purchased at a price that people can afford. That's the stuff that's superfluous, no matter what category it actually falls into, right?
Right, and again, it's just such a marked contrast with his main pitch against the Biden Harris, right? Which was everything's gotten too expensive. As soon as I'm
Yep.
in, prices are gonna, right back down. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that. We're gonna solve this problem, and it's like that hasn't happened at all. In fact, inflation is higher now than it was when he assumed office, and will only continue to be higher because of the tariffs. The immigration situation is a moral catastrophe,
Hmm.
the likes of which we have maybe never quite seen in this country. I
Right.
mean, the deporting without trial, without hearing, without any due process, and also the fantasia of these like marauding gangs of immigrants that they all built this case on, which is just
Yeah.
not true. It's like there are a lot of immigrants. Are some of them going to do crimes? Of course, but that's just a like actuarial reality. It's not
Hmm.
as though this like fantasy of like MS-13 and Tren de Agua taking over towns in Colorado was ever real. And but the Alcatraz thing is coming from that as well, right? Because it's like,
Yes.
well, we've got these marauding gangs. We absolutely cannot put them in with our normal criminal prisoners. We must put them on the prison island of the
Yeah.
from the
From
movies.
the movie, you saw the movie.
Well, right, but I mean, this. I think the movies part of it is important because it's like it is a fantastic. The whole thing is a fantasy, right?
That's
I
right.
mean, so like, where do you put these fantastical, non-existent criminals on the movie?
A fantastical, non-existent prison.
Right, that's literally
Right.
been collapsing for 70 years or whatever,
Hmm.
63 years, what have you. Yeah, so we're not doing so well.
No, and this topic came up because I think we've both seen, and I'm sure everybody has really, that there have been sort of at first it was obviously in opposition to Trump. You had this idea that the tariff thing was going to be very bad, launching a trade war was going to lead to disruptions in the quantity of supplies, the ability to transport supplies, and all of that, sort of in opposition to what looked like it was coming. And of course we had these things where Trump said he was going to do X and Y, and then he backed out in this way. He went back and did it again, backed out, and basically, a lot of businesses are just still banking that he'll just sort of shift course again.
which
We'll
he
talk a
which he
bit.
kind of has done on a number
Yeah,
of
but
things.
like we'll talk a bit about how that might not actually matter for the near term
Right,
because these
just
things.
because the instability itself is the problem.
Right, but then you had sent me this article in Rolling Stone that actually moved into the administration. That now one of the fascinating elements of what Trump is doing is that he's creating this situation, but also is like, I can't really remember a president who like looked at the American people and was like, it is going to potentially be painful for a bit.
I feel like
Like,
the Carter malaise thing is the last
right,
time a president tried this like kind of
right,
overtly negative messaging.
right. And
And
on the one hand, it's like, could that have been an effective and worthwhile message, across the board for the way that American society and economy has evolved over the last 50 years? Maybe, but
sure,
it's just funny that like he's doing the thing and then being like, like we'll talk about it a bit, but it's couched in this idea of this idea of a sort of a natural, unavoidable disaster that he's just doing. And so as we've gotten closer to this time, we are starting to see more and more neutral to supportive of Trump sources starting to say, yeah, yeah, we could like start running out of some stuff. And I just wanted this article in Rolling
yeah, yeah.
Stone. It's two Trump administration officials and a Trump aide told Rolling Stone that they have done some stockpiling of their own in recent weeks or months, and that they know others working in Republican politics who are doing the same. One of the Trump officials say they've already run to Target. I love that they're still pitching a specific uh, store to bulk buy toilet paper, some types of food, and other household supplies. One Trump official explained, quote, it would be stupid not to.
So it's like people on his side are like
Yes.
initiating the panic buying.
I mean,
Uh,
and they're also like, let's say,
and they're
let's just,
pragmatic about it. They're like, look, what do you want me to do?
right. And they're also just basically saying the threat of these things doesn't change his mind right now.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So because they're now doing it. Have you done any of this yet? Where do you?
Where do I send on panic buying?
Yeah.
No, I did
Is it
buy.
is it? We talked about this though a bit with Arrival,
Yeah,
right?
way back in the day.
Where it was like,
Oh,
looting
the
and
aliens are here, and then like,
yeah, panic buying continued, and they're all out buying like Chef Boyardee canned food or whatever to wait out the alien invasion. But the thing I said back then, which is kind of seems like, well, at what point is it not panic buying? You know what I mean?
a
Like we always call it panic buying, and usually it's associated with like they tell us on the TV that the
hurricane's
hurricane,
coming.
yeah,
Yeah,
and then it's fine, and all of a sudden you're just sitting there with 12 like 25-gallon containers of water just in your apartment for the next 2 years.
I mean, you haven't seen my apartment in a while, but I do not have room for that. I'm afraid.
But I do like I am feeling like I am gonna get a few things
I
soon.
mean,
That's where
I
I'm
got
at.
6 cans of lentils today just for my.
That's also it's also funny the idea of panic or not panic buying in these moments where you are also like just coming up with numbers like that. It's like how do you distinguish
These
between like
six,
six and
these six will be good.
this will do? And should I get what if I got 42? Would that be sort of more in keeping with the scale of what's going on?
It would, but
Like
my one grocery store is actually out of lentils, which has led me to, and I am the main person who buys them, so this is probably
mhm.
my fault. But I had to go to a secondary grocery store, and for a while
Oh my
I
God.
could
I'm
not
sorry,
find the
Stu.
lentils. There were garbanzo beans, a bunch of other
I've been
legumes.
to I've been to Trader Joe's a couple times over the last few weeks, and I have to say there's just a bit of like an end times feel.
Well,
Like
I mean
when
I don't go to fancy grocery stores.
just no, it's cheap. Just when people are
No,
shopping,
but
it feels
it's
like
fancy coated.
yes, I guess that's true. Right. They for like when they start having to raise prices substantially, I'll really believe in the end of the world. You know what I mean? Like whatever racket they're running to keep their shit that low. Once that goes, I will have lost all faith. But there are like you go and there's just gaps already.
Yeah.
You can see like there's just stuff that you
Right, these
can't get.
lentils that I wanted for my store have been gone for 2 weeks. That's why I had to go to the secondary store because I had already eaten all of the cans of lentils that I
Well,
bought
if
in
you've already
them.
you should have got more than six, man.
Well, I'm gonna buy 6 more tomorrow.
Or yeah, exactly. I am thinking about getting a few things though. And I think that's like a reasonable
It's flashed through my
situation.
mind that I should just order toilet paper on Amazon. Like that has occurred to me. I haven't done it, but
Yeah, well, toilet paper, we can get into this now because this was kind of one of the
yeah, I mean,
telltale COVID
I mean,
situations.
we've kind of done a soft transition into our main topic, which I like.
Mhm.
This is an innovation instead of the clean break from news to topic. We've elided the two
Yeah,
sections of the show.
we're
This is
learning.
a synergism. I mean, many podcasts couldn't do this, so quite they will doff their caps to us. Let me tell
Yes,
you. So in order to watch to kind of track this, there wasn't one like text we could go to.
not really.
Like normally we could find a movie. The main thing I ended up watching was this documentary that was made by Discovery. It's available on Max, called "Out of Stock: Supply Chain Crisis." That was honestly, the first episode was very informative. The subsequent two episodes were unnecessary, I found.
They were, but also the whole thing is very funny. It's like it's obviously like incredibly cheap to make. It's all this B-roll
Oh yeah,
stock footage of like people shopping
and shipping containers.
Yeah,
and
a shot of like an empty shelf, and it's like it's not just a supply chain; it's survival. Cut to commercial.
Yeah, I mean, it's silly. I thought it was informative on a like basic level, but I think when we all started thinking about the supply chain stuff was obviously when COVID happened, right? I can't say before that supply chain was a term that was in regular use in my vocabulary. Or was that something? I mean, you're a little bit more paranoid than I am, Michael. Were you like coming home from work one day being like, getting a little supply chain anxiety?
No, yeah, but I think I was more on the other side where it's like I'm really worried that this all looks so easy when I know I shouldn't be able to go to my bodega in Bushwick and get Fiji water.
Yeah.
This is not that something's not adding up eventually. But there were two main elements I feel in the early days of the COVID thing, which were toilet paper was a big thing. And then the other one was, of course, PPE.
That's right. It was very difficult to get masks.
But it was a sort of chaotic early thing, right? Where obviously at first you're told not to wear a mask, and it's not that big of a deal.
But that was, of course, revealed later to be because there
weren't masks, and they didn't want to run on masks. And I do think that had a sort of non-zero impact on some people's skepticism right out of the gates. Where
it had an enormous impact. I mean, that is at the root of so many people's COVID denial.
It just opened up this idea that, like, oh, okay, so you actually were unprepared,
and you were also just ready to lie to us about this.
That's right.
But so what else are you lying about? Yeah,
there were a couple of moments in the mask gate that I think people probably remember. There, of course, was the Massachusetts state administration working with Patriots owner Robert Kraft, as well as the Chinese UN ambassador and other Chinese officials, to secure the shipment of 1.2 million face masks to the state. And they had to pull out the 6-time world champion Patriots private jet.
That's right, the Patriots plane.
Pick up
which has recently been chartered to, I think, deport people. I think that's a story we passed over.
Yes, it's now become an extension of the federal government. But then on top of that, there was the famous one out of Illinois, right? Where it sort of read like a movie where the Illinois legislatures, do you remember this?
I don't.
They had gotten together a $3.4 million check. They had written this check to go and meet this guy at a McDonald's parking lot who said he knew a guy who had 1.5 million N95 respirators from China.
Yeah.
Did you?
This is vaguely familiar to me now, but
yeah.
Did they
They did.
It worked.
They successfully handed off the check, and the masks showed up. So
that's awesome.
But yeah, it really sort of, we've said this in a few other contexts about climate change and post-scarcity and all of that nightmare to come, that COVID with supply chain stuff as well is kind of like a soft launch for what we anticipate the rest of the century to look like. And this current one is an interesting moment because it's theoretically a moment before the supply chains will be stretched by scarcity issues, but instead it's being stretched by, global politics and Trump's behavior.
Well, I mean, by the whims of a single person, it seems.
That's right.
and that person is Peter Navarro. That's the funny thing is it's not even Trump that's really doing this. It's like Peter Navarro, this um, idiot who works for him, right? And I think it was one of the people that was jailed for contempt for not testifying before one of the commissions during the Biden administration.
Oh, really?
Pardoned by Trump, weirdly. But there was that story a couple weeks ago about how the Bessent and the other economic treasury secretary, or the other commerce secretary or whatever, knew that Navarro was going to be at an interview or something.
Yes.
And so they rushed to Trump and convinced him quickly to undo a lot of the tariffs. And when Navarro came back,
that undid a lot of the European ones, right?
Yeah, paused for 90 days, a bunch of stuff.
Loves a pause.
Which implies that the thing that people were saying about Biden, oh, he's just a puppet of who's really the president. It's this is something that was very obvious to me, but is as true for Trump, if not more so, right? Just because at least Biden had his awful ideological, Trump's just a cipher, right? He doesn't have anything. He's just surrounded by different ghouls, and one ghoul gets his ear, the next ghoul gets his ear.
Right.
And,
I mean, he can watch a movie and then open a prison.
Alcatraz is open again, and by the way, movies are now illegal. It's just what are we doing here? One thing I was struck by watching this little very ably done, but as you point out, generic and kind of whack documentary was that 2/3 of the U.S. economy is geared towards consumer spending. 2/3 of the money we take in or that we spend out is to get new Jordans and to get new.
But Stu, what else are we going to use it on? Maternity leave?
Art supplies. I guess that's what I use it on. But that's also consumer spending, though, right? Right, but healthcare, come on.
Libraries, who needs it?
99% of all shoes in the U.S. are imported. Okay.
Just 99.
Yeah. Okay. I wonder where that 1% of shoes that's made here is, right? So, these are the things that are immediately, rendered difficult to get by the trade war, right? It's we've already seen Temu has stopped shipping cheaply made Chinese goods directly to American consumers. Mm-hmm. That's probably the first to fall. I'm assuming there's a bunch of other, wrinkles. And it, in the articles that I've read about this, it's we have a couple weeks still, right? Maybe it'll be May 20th that we're recording this on the 5th of May. That's when maybe the real panic will set in.
Yeah.
And COVID, as you said, was a test run. One thing about the language used in the documentary I found interesting was they kept talking about the global supply chain as over a human body, right?
Yes, well,
the arteries of commerce,
love to do this,
right? And this is probably
the hand of the market. It's always
but it's probably back to
personification of these things.
My obsession with cybernetics and the idea that this is a system that has these built-in blockages that prevent the flow of messages and information, right. And that these cause these compounding sort of negative feedback cycles where and then the metaphor that they turn to in the documentary and that I used as the basis for our icon this week was when the Ever Given ship got stuck in the Suez Canal, which was a little bit after the peak of COVID, but we're all still kind of in COVID mode, and the supply chain was still recovering. And then suddenly you have this one ship that's just stuffed to the gills with junk, presumably, gets caught in the Suez Canal, which is, one of the two biggest freight arteries in the world, the other being, of course, the Panama Canal, which Trump is desperate to conquer.
Which makes more sense now, Well, he came out of the gates with that, then launched the trade war, and it's okay. It probably would be more important for him to have that. And
I mean, you sent along this article about the Ever Given incident, which is
I just always think about that crew on that day, man.
Well, the crazy thing is, it was only stuck
there. It's the ultimate "you got to be kidding me" moment, right?
It was only stuck there for 6 days, and yet I feel like we were hearing about it for months, right?
But that's like, I think that's one of the things about not just that incident, but what's
there's no stopgaps built into the system, right?
That's
it's
correct.
Like a ship being caught in a canal for 6 days can wreak havoc on global markets.
Right. Staffing shortages and shipping companies
people
due to
quit
COVID
being
can
truckers.
Bring trade to a halt.
Right. They're like, I'm not going to be a trucker anymore. F this. And it's like, oh.
Well, and like that's the other thing is like, if this goes on for long enough, the current one, it's like these people who are, also dependent on the most immediate income, all of these people living paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
It doesn't matter if it's 2 weeks. Obviously it will be longer than that, but even if it were, that would create like a real severing of their ability to provide.
And this is how you get towards something like the financial crisis in 2008, where suddenly you have thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people unable to pay their mortgages. This is what led to the run on the, financialized mortgage-backed securities, right, et cetera, and you have, again, a feedback thing where it's like one thing builds to another thing that builds to another thing, and then the whole system is under stress. And in that respect, it does represent a body having a heart attack, where an artery is clogged, the flow of blood is prevented, and the whole body is spasming, right?
Yep.
Now, that was largely prevented during COVID just because of extraordinary intervention by the federal government, right?
That's right. And governments around the world.
Well, like global governments, yeah. Which is kind of interesting, right? Because it's like, oh, wait, you can do what now?
Right.
Wait, you're going to intervene?
But you notice that very quickly. It was like, but this is the only time we're ever going to be able to do this, by the way.
Like, we have to keep up the fiction that there's some kind of, like, that the system isn't just a lie. Right. I mean, we have to keep up the fiction that the system is real.
Right. What COVID was also, whatever, a soft launch for, obviously with very serious ramifications. When I say that, I'm not trying to downplay what happened. Instead, rather that the scale and longevity of it could be dwarfed by things coming. But, basically the idea of the system that you're talking about, the body of trade that facilitates this sort of illusion of the seamlessness of whatever stage of capitalism we're in, right? That there's exploitation in these places, and these places. They all there's trade deficits, there's relationships, there's, all of this work that goes on that makes it so you or I don't think about anything.
That's right.
When we go in to purchase something, right? And what that does is it sort of allows the overarching functionality of the system to be able to absorb, story after story of 70,000% of Americans don't have enough money to pay for $300 unseen expense, or paycheck to paycheck, or medical care, medical debt, all of these things that you hear about, right? They get sort of like, they get thrown up against the wall of this overarching illusion of seamlessness, right?
Yeah.
And what COVID did was it stopped that. It was like, no, that is now not happening. There were like, whatever, it was like 40 million unemployed people in America.
Overnight, practically.
Right, overnight. And so given that the seamlessness had gone away, the quickest and most effective decision to cope, and we've talked about this a lot, even just not even on the podcast, about how COVID did represent an opportunity to reflect on what these things should look like and what life and labor and wages should look like going forward. Of course, that didn't happen.
Well, and the greatest failure of the Biden administration, quite frankly, was to immediately claw back whatever gains were made in that moment.
That's right.
Extended unemployment insurance is leaving,
Right.
Oh,
but now
you think you can get a free ride? No way. It's like, you're the Democrat. Right.
What are you think I should I worked so hard to pay back my student loan, so you should just get off scot-free? Like this mentality of everyone should be punished for eternity.
Yeah.
But now we're in this situation again where like all of that could be justified, including the intervention, which was primarily to make it look like the systems of capital can function even in these extreme moments.
Right.
It was a situation that was permitted under the auspices, the guise of a public health emergency.
Yep.
It was like there's a degree of sympathy that went into the bailouts and the checks that people were getting. The PPA, what were they called? The loans.
Oh
Remember
yeah,
those?
I do. Yeah.
That like no one ever had to pay back. All of this stuff, it was all like, well, yeah, but if you like, you got to be careful when you go grocery shopping. You might die after, right? But
Yeah.
this time it's this other confluence of forces, right?
Well, it's this phony nationalism, right?
Right, but also on top
We're
of that,
getting
like,
ripped off, therefore we have to suffer.
right. But like bigger picture, there's also like massive exponential level of automation and AI that is coming
It's
into
looming, yeah.
that's sitting there that like the way that people are getting stretched and will be stretched by what happens should this trade war continue, will really reveal that those people then at the end of this might not even have a job driving a truck or doing what we do,
or
right?
doing anything. Yeah,
doing anything at all.
They're desperate to automate me out of employment. Let me tell you,
yeah,
some universities are already being like, well, if we just
of course
chat GPT can do as good a job as a
and
professor.
They all imagine some distant future where this will be so great for all of us, but it doesn't take into account whatever hellscape.
Well, it doesn't take into account who is in charge of the fucking global economy. It's ridiculous. That's right. Oh yeah, like Elon Musk is going to be like a really benevolent overlord. Jeff Bezos, the guy who famously doesn't let his employees piss on the job, is going to make sure we have a universal basic income.
But it was like talking about the supply chain crisis and then everything, obviously it was one part of the COVID situation, the difficulties of trade and meeting the demands of a marketplace.
Yeah.
But, now that we're a few years removed from it, I found this article just a couple of days ago that really sort of painted the picture of like where we are now versus 2020, which is the current annual inflation rate is 2.4, less than half percentage point above the Fed's 2% target. Consumers today are paying more close attention to cumulative inflation.
Of course.
Prices are 23.3% more expensive today than they were before the coronavirus recession began in 2020 in February.
That's insane.
So like the idea again, like you don't have like the sensation of that type of rise because it's expanded over half a decade.
But I really do. I mean, I'm at the age where like 5 years is no longer meaningful.
Right. What I'm saying is that, it's what looks like it might be coming. We sort of saw the egg disaster, right?
Sure.
Where that type of level of increase is going to come to certain sectors in a fortnight.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what they say. I mean, who knows? We'll see how it plays out. But my point is that COVID obviously went on for longer than one anticipates the full-on 145% tariff on China lasting. However, you can see that like from that point, the reverberating effects go on through many people's like prime earning years, prime saving years. And these are the types of things that when you get a president who's like, don't buy a couple more $30 for a while, I don't understand what the problem is. It's just, it's incredibly dangerous. Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, you sent this article, which was really helpful because at the end he says, Casey Armstrong, Chief Marketing Officer of ShipBob, Global Fulfillment and Supply Chain Problem. He says, you're not going to run out of food or toilet paper. So this is going to be something different than the shortages we saw in COVID-19, right? But don't be surprised if your $3 spray bottle or favorite pair of $5 socks, not my favorite pair of $5 socks, Michael, vanishes from shelves or doubles in price, Armstrong said. And it's like, I love the $3 spray bottle as an example because I would never buy such a thing, but obviously many people would. I mean, I would never buy it because I don't care about my life or sell. But other people have use for these
also,
things.
Also, like they're not $3 anymore either.
Well, right, there are maybe at the dollar store if you're lucky. But I mean, at the Walgreens, that's like a $5.99 spray bottle already. That's right. But the idea of that suddenly being 12, or like socks, like I have not bought socks in like 3 years. My socks are all ruined. I was even thinking about buying socks, and now I hear this
$5 a pair. I'll tell you that right now.
$5 pair of socks. Like where are these on sale? Alert me at once.
But that's again, like, one of the ways that this always gets sort of disseminated is through the base act of consumerism. Like, product X will cost price Y. But so when Trump starts talking about like, oh well, what about all the stuff that's made here? It's this lack of recognition of like component parts that get imported from these places to then be made.
Like where are the screws made? Where are the bolts and the nuts coming from? Why are all? I saw a tweet the other day. It's just funny because I was walking in the Bronx. I was going to work, and I went over one of those manhole covers. Which, by the way, whenever I go over one of those in New York, I'm always like, this is gonna be the one that blows. I'm just convinced I'm gonna be obliterated by a. But apparently that does happen. But all the manhole covers are made in India, and it's like proudly made in Mumbai or something is like stamped on them. And then I was on Twitter the other day. Some Trump person was like, "Why the hell are all the New York City manhole covers made in India? Like, can't we get Pittsburgh and Cleveland on this?" Just like, and like this mentality of like the idea that there is just like a dormant like steel. This is a little bit like the Alcatraz thing, right? Yeah, that just like there's a steel mill and a iron foundry waiting. Unused.
And a bunch of people trained and ready to do it.
Yeah, right. Well, not only that, it's in perfect condition. You just have to turn the switch on, and there we go.
Yeah, they're going to be the best manhole covers ever. So
yeah,
it's frightening. But there's also like the one I wanted to mention quickly was because so I saw Warren Buffett saying how acts of trade can be acts of war.
Wow. Alert Socrates. There's a new philosopher in town.
But it did bring back brought to mind the Houthis, right?
Yeah.
Where, one of the reasons that they were such hated enemies of the American state was actually their disruption to global supply chains.
The main reason.
That's the main reason. And so you're seeing this like, when we talk about the way that supply chains kind of sat invisible for a very, very long time, and even sort of went back to some version of that after
the COVID, peak of COVID, yeah.
Right, like the Hegseth thing, the signal chat, right? A lot of that was about
sending a message to our allies about trade.
That they would have to pay us essentially for opening up the trade avenues.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that that's an important point to make, that like the other side of this is that there are also groups who have a vested interest in disrupting these things.
Oh yeah.
Right. And they have been identified as the main artery of the entire setup. And so it's very hard to envision trade war or not, that the situation is going to be copacetic, in the years to come.
Very true. It's very true. All right, well, I think that's pretty good for our supply chain ruminations. A little bit looser than our normal. We didn't have a long script of plot recap or incisive, brilliant, genius level analysis. But I think, nevertheless, I think we made some good headway. I feel my mind has been expanded by this conversation, and I can only hope that our listeners' minds have been as well.
Yeah, I'm off to Costco.
Yeah. Excuse me. I'm going to need that shopping cart. I will be filling it with lentils. Good sir. All right. So next week we're going to be talking about Looper, a movie that is made by it's Ryan Johnson, I think, right? The hated director of the Star Wars movie that losers don't like.
Yes. Yes, it is.
The Last Jedi. Is that the one? Who cares?
Oh, was that hated, that movie?
Let's just use my favorite turn of phrase. It's scene dividing. One half of the room hates it, one half of the room thinks. But like the chuds hate it because it makes Luke Skywalker look weak and makes a girl look strong.
Yeah.
It's really sophisticated. It's a sophisticated argument. They've got a really refined perspective on the world that they've developed.
We'll get to it eventually, I'm sure.
That will be fun. That will be a truly dark day. That I welcome. In the meantime, Looper next week. That'll be fun. If you'd like to, you can follow and subscribe to us on the podcatcher of your choice. If you really like the show, you can also leave a rating and or review on that podcatcher. And you can also follow us, of course, on Instagram at the End of the World WMS. Yeah, supply chains. I don't know. My mind is expanded by this. Despite, I mean, it sounds like I'm kidding, but this was useful to think about, because it put me in a more like, oh, we are in this like enormous enmeshed system that we take for granted, and like it's like a little bit like
not for much longer,
right? Well, it's seeing the gears underneath the watch face or something. It's like, oh, that's why the Houthis, and that's why it's useful. All right, but I look forward to next week, and until then, this has been the End of the World with Michael and Stu.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Stu, and we'll talk to you real soon.